Dennis, I want to thank you for allowing me to record this conversation with you because we have had the most lovely conversations throughout the last few months. And I know that so many other people want to hear from you and from your wisdom. And I keep telling them that all the wisdom is there, and they keep asking me to hear more from you. And we're going through some really, really crazy times, and the ability to reach out to you and have you give us some answers is really a blessing. So thank you for making yourself available.
My pleasure. I love you. I love, of course, PragerU, and I love TPUSA. I always remind people that Charlie's last book, just published, on the importance for Christians and non-Jews generally of a Sabbath, he dedicated the book to me. It gives you an idea of how close we were.
So, Dennis, we just witnessed AMFest, which was, I think, in many ways, a major success. They've had over 30,000 people attend this incredible conference for Turning Point USA. And I keep thinking that if you were physically well, you probably would have been there on stage, given how close you were with Turning Point and Charlie Kirk, and even with Erica Kirk. And I'm curious, if you were on stage at Turning Point this past month, what would you have spoken about? What would have been your message?
I would reaffirm that to be a good American is not so much America first, which again I do believe in, but rather the American Trinity, the term I have coined for the three mottos on every coin in America for at least a century. In God we trust, e pluribus unum, Latin for from many one, and liberty. If you affirm those three, in God we trust, from many one, and liberty, you're a conservative. That makes you, now not that any doctrine could be perverted, but that qualifies in many ways the three doctrines. And the e pluribus unum is fascinating. From many one, that's the one the left most rejected. Well, they rejected liberty and in God we trust too. But they really rejected that one because they didn't want from many one. They want from many, many. That is what they want. You're not an American. You are, and then they add some nationality before that or ethnicity. That's what you are. That's what you are first. When any speaker has mentioned the melting pot, it was roundly dismissed by a great number of people, including conservatives. But that is what America is. It doesn't mean you abandon your identity of your ancestors. You should honor it, even learn their language. But you have joined the melting pot of America. That was the ideal when they wrote E Pluribus Unum. And then there is liberty. So I would have spoken at some length, whatever time I was given. I would have devoted a fair amount of it to explaining what is it that a conservative believes. And the first is morality, that everything is judged by, is it moral? Not is it my national identity? Because as I pointed out, in China, Russia, North Korea, that's the last thing you want right now. It's, in any event, I have said very often on my radio show that all good has been achieved by outliers. Not all outliers are good, but all good has been achieved by outliers. Dietrich Bonhoeffer in Germany, and the dissenters in Russia, and likewise in China, whom we don't hear much about, but that's the case. So, is it moral? Is the first question to be asked. Then, if it's moral, America first. If it's not moral, then not America first.
So, Dennis, I think it's really important that you mentioned something that actually crossed my mind, and that is Turning Point USA is predominantly for the young, for the youth. And I think people might forget that sometimes when people like me would send our kids to these conferences. We are really hoping that they're going to learn from the best, about the best. They will come back home all rejuvenated. This is not YouTube or the public square. This is really an environment where we are hoping that people will invest in our children to learn good ideas when we send them there, whether they're in high school or in college. Obviously, one of the greatest accomplishments of Turning Point USA is the ability to galvanize young people. With that accomplishment, there's this incredible responsibility that the Turning Point USA now has to make sure that their speakers remember who they're speaking to, that they're speaking to the young and the impressionable. You speak about morality. Can you give me another example of how you would address coaching young people in this kind of an environment?
Here's another value that can easily come into conflict, and through much of human history has conflicted with morality, and that was loyalty. The loyalty is beautiful if it's moral. Loyal to an a-hole is not moral. Why is that not obvious? Because to the people who say that loyalty to my friend who has gone to the dark side in morality must continue, because that's what a friend is about. I'm sorry. I don't agree with that at all. What you're saying to your friend is, I don't love you for what you stand for. Then what? I love you for who you are? What's the difference between who I am and what I stand for? I mean, they're not in every instance identical, obviously. But, you know, the biggest compliment that I have gotten from random people walking over to me in airports was, I feel like I know you. And the reason I took that so positively is, you do know me. That's what my answer to them. You, Marissa, who know me obviously personally so long, I'm saying this in front of you. I think you could say there is no difference, and there shouldn't be. By the way, I got to tell a funny story. You have the time?
I have the time. I'm sure everybody has the time to
Okay.
hear funny stories.
All right. So, in Grand Rapids, Michigan, I was at a PragerU fundraiser, and I mentioned this factor in my life, and that a caller called me recently at that time and said, Dennis, I have a perfect description of you. And I remember thinking, uh-oh. And he goes, you, sir, are transparent. And I thought, that is great. I am transparent. I love that. So I told the story to the Grand Rapids group. Then my son, David, spoke. He speaks at many of these events. And he said, my father told you that he is transparent. But what he didn't tell you is what a challenge it was to be raised by a transparent. I cracked up so much that I felt I embarrassed myself. I thought it was so witty. And everybody cracked up. It was a really, really terrific line. All right, anyway, let me go back to the loyalty issue. Loyalty to kin, meaning extended family, loyalty to ethnically related people, loyalty to my tribe, to my nation, in many instances. These produced much of the evil of human history. Loyalty, the kinship trumped the moral. Nothing can trump the moral. That's my point. That's what true conservatism is. We conserve the greatest values of history. And one of them is that God wants us to be good. And that's number one. He doesn't say loyal to kin, and he doesn't say loyalty to friends. Those are beautiful things if they're moral. He doesn't say any of these other things. He created us to be good to one another. And by the way, when we weren't good to one another, and everybody was pretty rotten, the story goes that he destroyed the world. And I defend God in a very difficult issue in my Genesis volume of my 4 out of 5 volumes written on the first 5 books of the Bible. So it's all moral first.
And Dennis, I think this message really resonates and applies as we all go into our New Year's resolution, where it's not just about politics, but the concept of morality versus loyalty to friends or loyalty to kin applies to all of us. I remember when my kids were toddlers and they would play in a sandbox. Kids would start shoving sand in their mouth and hitting each other. I would grab my kid and I will pull them out of that sandbox because I didn't want them to be surrounded by bad behavior. And as my kids grow up and they spend time with other friends and we identify that their friends are not raised with good values and don't have good values, I encourage my children to distance themselves from friends who they may love and may be close to us, but frankly are not the right fit for them because our children are impressionable. And even I myself, if I'm spending time with people and I feel like they are engaged in unethical and immoral acts, I eject myself from that environment. I don't spend, because I know these things can be contagious. The behavior can be incredibly lucrative, sadly, and I think that it is very important that we teach young people that when they are noticing that they're surrounded by immoral people, they need to not just notice it, but they need to make sure that they put a fence around themselves so they don't become part of it. And I'm wondering, how would you apply this message that you talk about in the political space, where you talk about America being a moral nation? How would you apply that personally to people who are listening as they are developing their New Year's resolution?
The idea of distancing yourself from bad influencers in your life is extremely valuable. I have spent much of my life not distancing myself professionally from these people, but personally, my friends my friends circle, the inner circle, and the second circle, and the third circle of my friends are all good people. So much so that the vast majority of them have made close friends with other members of these circles. It has really touched me how many beautiful relationships were made. And it's because that's what you bond with another person. When you say, oh, I bond with so-and-so, but we don't talk about X, Y, or Z, it's not, now, it might be a trivial matter, and that's fine. But it might be a big matter, and that's not fine. One big matter is anti-Semitism. And I will just tell you, I've written a book, which I wish everyone would read, Why the Jews, and The Greatest Predictor of Human Evil. What a fitting subtitle, given the world we live in, that every society, every nation that devolved into anti-Semitism ended up ruining itself. From medieval Spain to the present day. It's a very worrisome thing if it gains traction in the most important country in the world, the United States. One of the first things George Washington did as president was send a personal envoy and personal note to the Jewish congregation in Rhode Island. And it certainly wasn't for votes. There were so few Jews in America at the time, right after 1776. But he did it. And John Adams wrote, no group in the history of the world has done more to civilize humanity than the Hebrews. This was the Judeo-Christian society, not just a Christian. Christianity spread the values that it itself inherited from Judaism. As I tell my vast number of Christian friends, Jesus never read the New Testament. He only knew the Old Testament. And that's what he quoted almost all the time. Well, anyway, look, there's so much to say on all of this. But I don't want to overrun my allotted time.
Well, Dennis, I want to wish you a healthy and happy New Year. I want to wish our nation, our country, the world a happy and healthy New Year. May we all recover from the adversity that we have struggled with in 2025 and step into 2026, our country's birthday, our 250th birthday, with more resolve, more clarity, and more morality, as you would say. Happy New Year.
Amen.